Today we're going into the ending of Demon Slayer, which is the final battle against Muzan. Because everyone's been pushed out of the Infinity Castle, but they're in the middle of a crowded city. That gives Muzan so many chances to get stronger, or to heal anything that's slowing him down. There's also an hour and 30 minutes until the sun comes up, and they've lost a bunch of their fighters. Muzan's, of course, raging, and certain they can't stall him until morning. As proof, he heals almost at the same time that they can cut him, as if they did nothing to him. When he sends out more appendages, the lower-ranking swordsmen sacrifice themselves to keep the Hashira and Tanjiro alive, becoming human shields for them. Their faith in the Hashira is what pushed them to be able to be chopped and dismembered without regret. As for the fighters, Muzan's overload of blood can kill whoever's cut by him, unlike being turned, which is how we find our MC, covered in flesh and unmoving. And with that, Tanjiro's dead and the story's over. But there's still 20 chapters left. Let's take a moment to touch on this trend of killing main characters. If it's not at the end of the story, it's not convincing, especially when the main villain is still alive. In this case, Tanjiro's the only living user of sun breathing. How could he honestly be dead if it's the only thing that gravely injured Muzan? Even without knowing spoilers, we could guess Tanjiro's coming back, so what's the point? The same way Tanjiro keeps seeing his family members when Nezuko needs help, it's her turn to get a wake-up call from Dad. Still struggling through the treatment to turn her human, she runs from Ubuyashiki's estate too fast for anyone to catch. The retired Hashira asks Kiriya what to do, and he tells them to let her go. This also involves a nudge from the afterlife. Urokodaki quickly loses track of Nezuko, and her father points the way to where Tanjiro's collapsed. Back in the city, the Hashira fight to keep Muzan back, while getting slashed constantly. Mitsuri is the first one affected, and tells them to protect themselves. But Gyome finally appears with Sanemi. It must have been rough trying to recover from the Kokushibo fight. Sanemi also brought some oil and matches for Muzan. Who needs to fight fair when the demon never does? It's also when Gyu spots Murata, calling him over to get Tanjiro some help. And, big surprise, Tanjiro wakes up in his ancestor's memories. This ancestor was friends with Yoriichi, who sometimes comes to visit him. Before Murata can tend to Tanjiro, he's called over to help free Yushido from the rubble, because then he could help them to heal Tanjiro. Back in the memory, Tanjiro tries to ask about sun breathing, but he can't interrupt or change the memory. Yoriichi tells his friend about everything that's happened to him, like his wife and unborn child being killed, hunting demons to avenge them, creating and teaching derivative forms to those who couldn't pick up sun breathing, and facing Muzan. After being underestimated, Yoriichi proves to Muzan that he's in a league of his own, destroying him and his body parts with ease. But before he could die, Muzan made sure to burst into hundreds of pieces that would be difficult to track. Yoriichi then turned to his companion, Tamayo. She was deeply upset Yoriichi didn't kill him, but also glad to finally be free of his control. Because of this, Yoriichi let her go so that they could cooperate. Not long after, Yoriichi was informed his twin became a demon, which would normally lead to his execution. But since the new Ubuyashiki head was a 6-year-old who didn't want any more death, Yoriichi was exiled instead. So now Yoriichi blames himself for never saving those he wanted to, or ridding the world of Muzan. Tanjiro and his ancestor both want to console him, but the young child does it best. With her in his arms, he cries, probably reminded of the child that he lost. Muzan strikes faster, his whip-like limbs breaking the surrounding. It pushes Gyome back, stopping the others from keeping him alive to take Muzan down. They clearly feel he's needed to win. Mitsuri was considering going in close to hold Muzan back, but she inexplicably loses her arm and cheek. Even Gyome couldn't understand what just happened. In moments, Obanai rushes her away from the fight, showing how much she matters to him, and how little he thinks of himself because of his past. Obanai's story involved a selfish family working for a demon, and only women among his relatives. He was the first male in over 300 years and kept prisoner. After meeting the demon they worshipped, he only survived because of his size and unique look. They had been feeding her babies to live. Obanai was cut to resemble the demon and stuck in the cage with nothing but a random snake. Eventually, the flame Hashira found him when he escaped from there. It was probably Shinjiro's doing. Obanai's captors had been killed for failing to keep him imprisoned, and since his cousin blamed him, it made him believe that he was cursed, so only killing demons, then dying in battle would clear him of his past. Nezuko still runs, while elsewhere the Kakushi and support members try to lead the civilians away from the battle. They find Chachumaru, freeing it, and rushes off. Obanai struggles to find ways to slow Muzan's regeneration, while not getting sucked into the vacuum-like mouths. Giyu loses grip on his sword from the poison's effect, but Sanemi and Obanai cover for him so he can jump back in. The kitty arrives with vials to heal them. Muzan cuts Chachumaru down, but it's too late. They're feeling better. Muzan throws a violent tantrum trying to end them, but Obanai doesn't feel that he's done enough and wants to accomplish more before he dies. That reminds him of how Tokito turns his blade red, using only his grip strength. He hastily does the same. A bit too late, Obanai realizes that forcing it pushed his body too far, when he was already injured and losing oxygen. It pushes him in immediate danger, but they have to all stay alive to keep chipping away at Muzan together. Giyu tries to save him, but a ghost gets there first. No, it's just Kanao and Inosuke using Yushiro's paper talismans. Still, Muzan figures it out from the traces of their movements and the types of attacks he receives. Zenitsu's there too, screaming as soon as the paper slashed and he can't hide anymore. Roaring with life, Inosuke has more papers to share. Sanemi appreciates that Muzan's been cut with a red blade, showing it takes more time to regenerate. Of course, Muzan gets annoyed at them using tricks, but he's one to talk with his multiple organs, shape-shifting, and enhanced skills. With things back on track, Gyomei strikes his weapons together to activate them and dish out more damage. Sanemi gets with the program and hits Gyu's blade so theirs can be red too. There's still over an hour until dawn. Finally returning to Tanjiro, he's been injected by Yushiro to try and bring him back to life. Murata struggles to get the sword from his grip, even unconscious. Slowly, Tanjiro's pulse comes back, so they try to wake him up, but nothing works. Until they say Muzan is going to escape the fight. Only the mention of Muzan or Nezuko ever works. Tanjiro suddenly grips his sword tightly, and his eye flies open. At the fight, Goto watches with the bated breath as Gyomei knocks a chunk out of Muzan. Sanemi grabs a paper and sees all the swordsmen that were hiding with it. Now that Gyomei can focus, he opens up the see-through world and notices all the organs Muzan has. After getting Obanai's attention for backup, Muzan gets set off by their teamwork. He rushes them like a hurricane, scaring even Goto with the sound. In a flash, the Hashira are dispersed by the attack, and worse, Gyomei loses a leg. Yu an arm, and the others are knocked out. Nao's talisman has been split, and she's frozen from shock. With Muzan stalking towards her, Tanjiro dives in like a fire god. Even though Muzan tries to tell him how bad he looks, he still gets a glimpse of his worst enemy. From Tanjiro's ancestral memories, he was able to catch the mistakes he made while performing sun breathing. Back then, Yoriichi displayed his skill because Suyako asked, and Sumiyoshi made sure to memorize each form, turning it into a dance. As this was his last visit, he left them his Hanafuda earrings. Sumiyoshi was so sad, but promised to pass on his swordsmanship in return for saving their lives. Thanks to Yoriichi, Tanjiro's ancestors led to him using Hinokami Kagura and Tamayo joining their side. If not for him, they'd be in a worse situation. Thinking about the forms, Tanjiro realizes something about the 13th form. It's just using them one after another to destroy Muzan. He, and we, know he can't compare to Yoriichi or even his father's stamina, but Tanjiro has the will to try anyway, and just that internal strength is enough to make Muzan see the phantom of his past. While fighting for his life, Tanjiro analyzes and links the forms as best he can. When approaching death, people can unlock strength they don't usually need, so they can survive. Unfortunately, that also applies to Muzan. Still, Tanjiro turns his blade red without Nezuko's blood, But Muzan doesn't worry because he knows firsthand how good Yoriichi was, and Tanjiro isn't him. That doesn't stop Tanjiro from getting 6 forms connected, even though it makes him dizzy, and he still hasn't cut Muzan. At this point, he can barely feel his limbs, but keeps it up, with so much time until sunrise. Tanjiro's getting slower and less precise. But Muzan hasn't been able to kill him either. And that's when he realizes that he's slowing down because of whatever Tamayo did. He demands to know what she's done besides turning him human, but she refuses to say. Instead, he looks through her memories and sees her working with Shinobu on a mixed drug, reversing and aging him by decades every minute. In other words, he's now thousands of years older. Chopped Chachimaru's found by Yushiro and set right. They gave the serum to the 3 who didn't receive treatment yet, and Yushiro worries for Guillaume, who's lost so much blood from his thigh, trying to patch him up. Even he recognizes the stone pillar's value, so if he's done then, Tanjiro's doomed to struggle on his own. He can't help but cry, thinking about Tamayo and hoping that she's watching over them. Just as Tanjiro is trying to do the Hinokami faster, his vision starts going dark. Before Muzan can finish him, a giant serpent pushes him away. Tanjiro can smell who it is, being held by Obanai, who lost his sight in Muzan's earlier blast. His snake helps him to see while they flee from Muzan climbing buildings and rushing towards them like a true monster. Having Kabumaru help Obanai avoid attacks further upsets Muzan, who already has a short fuse. But it's not them that upsets him. Really, it's the effects of Tamayo's cells. And while Tanjiro dodges spiked limbs, he can see the past scars left from Yoriichi, and it's indicating Muzan's weak points, proving the man still helped them far in the future. In the past, Muzan mistakenly thought that Yoriichi was weak because he didn't exude any bloodthirst or aggression, and was mainly neutral. That was a huge mistake. Of course, considering his permanent scars now, he also deems Yoriichi to be the real villain, with his unmatched power, even so long after his death. Tanjiro vows to kill Muzan no matter what, and the wounds, despite shifting around, can hide the places to attack. At the same time, he worries about Obanai since his snake can only provide so much help. With 40 minutes till dawn, Tanjiro remembers the talismans from Yushiro, but before he can use them, Muzan panics and runs off, knowing he's minutes away from disappearing. Obanai and us aren't really surprised, since Muzan's only ever been about his survival. He's running so fast, and it's hard for the two to catch up. He even has the nerve to step on and crush the swordsman he cut into pieces earlier. It sets Tanjiro off, and he throws all their swords at him in retaliation. That probably reminded him of Akaza fleeing after killing Rengoku. Just as Muzan worries about them piercing him and keeping him stuck there, Obanai pops up behind him and does just that, through his neck with a red blade too. That allows Tanjiro to catch up by using sun breathing, and to hand over some paper. Muzan strikes back, trying to cut through them, so Tanjiro has to ask Kaburamaru to collect one. Being the best snake pet, he does. With that, they believe that they can keep Muzan from escaping, even just as a duo. And seeing him stressed out and run out of breath makes it pretty convincing. Finally, Nezuko's nearing the area, while becoming her human self again. She's still fairly outside the city, but close enough to hear the fighting. As she approaches, her memories start to come back about her family's death, and Muzan being the culprit. She relives the journey, and Tanjiro being a staple the whole time. Nezuko gets completely bombarded with everything, and all the people she met and who died, finally recalling her own name. She's back to her true self. Tanjiro continues to hold on, with Muzan worrying because others are waking up from the attack. He can even tell it's because of Yushiro helping them all heal a bit. And Muzan may be a piece of garbage, but even he can't deny how deep and powerful the connection of the Demon Slayers is to come this far. Not wanting to risk death, Muzan starts preparing to blow up into pieces and escape, but this time it doesn't work, thanks to Tamayo's multifaceted poison in him. She takes great pleasure in seeing him cough up blood. Can you blame her? He's the reason her family was killed. Tamayo relishes in the fact that even weaker than him, she can help take him down. We might even say that she's doing half the work. Muzan admits that normally all of them, and even red blades, wouldn't be enough, but the drugs are helping to nerf him too well. He needs more time to break it down inside him, so he lets off a wide burst while Tanjiro is approaching to stop his movement. Even back at the Ubuyashiki home, Kirya and his sisters felt it through the talisman, and are struck. With less than 30 minutes until daybreak, this is not the time for them to be stalled. But Tanjiro can't stop the pain or catch his breath, feeling overwhelmed. Every non-combatant prays for their success, from the butterfly house to Rengoku's home. Inosuke and Zenitsu fight on, pushing themselves impossibly far, but no one ever thought this would be easy, especially since Muzan blasts Inosuke next. Tanjiro thankfully rejoins to protect him with the Hinokami. Still, he had to stab himself to get this far, and it's noticeable. While he and Inosuke attack, Zenitsu asks for help from his master. When Zenitsu uses Godspeed, slower than usual, Tanjiro covers him. Then Muzan gets pinned to the wall. With every part of Muzan used as a weapon, Tanjiro doesn't have much hope of just surviving. Just then, Mitsuri shows up to tear his arm off in anger. It's enough of a distraction for Sanemi to jump in, helping pin him down. Muzan splits his face apart into a horrifying giant mouth. Tanjiro's right in its path, but Obanai, being the martyr, steps in between to take the massive bite. Sunlight starts peeking over the horizon. Death's approaching Muzan, and he can't deny it now. Frenzied, he pushes against them to free himself, throwing them in different directions with an assault. That makes Tanjiro lose an arm, still struggling to keep his blade in him. He tries to turn it red again, but it's harder with the missing limb. In a beautiful show of symmetry, Giyu uses his arm to replace Tanjiro's, and Muzan starts to burn thanks to that, but he'll never give in. He considers shrinking, but knows he'd burn faster, so he swells up like a giant baby. And in that balloonish form, they can't keep him still. With Tanjiro being sucked in, Kiriya shouts in worry, telling everyone alive to stop him from escaping the sun. They throw bookshelves and even drive a car into Muzan to stop him, but they get too close. They push a bus at him next, trying to drop it on top of him. And when Muzan's ready to slice, Kiriya orders them to retreat so he can think of something else. Thankfully, Sanemi's returned to slice his hands, with Guillaume using the last of his incredible strength to wrap a chain around Muzan's neck. After much tugging and shouting, Muzan falls onto his back, his limbs not regenerate. And still, Muzan won't let up, trying to dig into the ground. Water breathing, wind breathing, and even serpent breathing combined doesn't keep him down. Then Guillaume's chain snaps, and they expect the worst. But Tanjiro frees himself and cuts Muzan, exposing him to light until he flakes into nothing. Even Kiriya can't help but cry with relief. Everyone around, including Murata, can't believe their eyes. It's an emotional celebration of their efforts, bringing them all closure. The battle's taken so much out of Kiriya that he passes out, and the Kakushi rush around to treat the wounded now that they can. Guillaume, having lost his leg in so much blood, knows it's not worth using anything on him, and to keep it for the younger swordsman. I think he truly regrets Tokito's passing, seeing as he was the youngest Hashira. In his final moments, he sees the orphans that he took care of, resolving everything with them. He passes on with a smile. Obanai goes to Mitsuri's side with Kaburomaru, so he can confess his feelings in his last moments. They recall their first impressions of each other, deciding to be together in their next lives since they won't be alive much longer. Sanemi ends up in the afterlife, his siblings on one side, and his mom in darkness, feeling that she can't join them in the light. Just as he's resolved to hell, his father pulls her away and shoves Sanemi towards the living. Inosuke's energetic enough to bite a Kakushi, with Zenitsu requesting they pass on his love to his wife. Lastly, Giyu's attended to, but wants to check on Tanjiro. He finds him slumped over and freezes. Giyu breaks down, knowing it's the third time that he couldn't save someone dear to him. Nezuko finally gets there, and Giyu takes the blame. Muzan had darkness constantly around him. Even at birth, he came out dead. But once they prepared to cremate him, he came back to life. He believes he achieved what he wanted, wishing that he had more than one life to do it. Muzan admits Kaguya was right, that everyone dies and only feelings remain. As he cries, only because he'll disappear, he decides to live on in Tanjiro, whose cells are still alive. With his genetics and skills, Tanjiro can be even stronger and even conquer the sun. As his last ashes disappear, the Kakashi notice Tanjiro's moving. He regrows his arm and eye and immediately attacks the Kakashi. The sun stops him for a brief moment while Giyu shouts for them to move. He needs help, but no one's able to move. Zenitsu and Inosuke can hear the ruckus, but Sanemi's still out cold. Giyu shoulder checks Tanjiro to keep him from hiding and away from the humans to bite. But as expected, the sun stops hurting him and he slashes Giyu. Inosuke stops him, but he can't deal with such a gentle friend being this way. He just can't hurt him. Before he can do more damage, Nezuko hugs Tanjiro to try and turn him back the way that he did for her so long ago. She refuses to let go, even when he scratches her and pushes at her hold. Even Zenitsu and Inosuke can't knock any sense into him. After unleashing the long whips, Nezuko clings to Tanjiro even when he bites her. Giyu considers how they could stop him, thinking of no weaknesses. Nezuko begs him to come back to himself, getting injured again as he launches a massive attack. Zenitsu panics for her and Inosuke and can barely move, but still wants to help. Despite her blood everywhere, Tanjiro's not eating Nezuko. He's fighting it, and Yushido can't help with the sun out. Repaying his kindness, Kanao walks over with the antidote that she has left. She still has one eye working to use for enhancement. As fast as possible, she dives in and gets cut but reaches him. Tanjiro's buried deep among Muzan's hateful cells. Tanjiro wants to go home, but he's too tired to fight. He prays for help, reaching out for it, but Muzan tries to keep him down. He tells Tanjiro that no one's left, including Nezuko, but Tanjiro wants to be free with his family and memories, the hands of those he touched. Hashira and friends, and even Yoriichi, help him up. Muzan spews more venom, saying no one will forgive him, but Tanjiro insists that he has to apologize. Unlike Muzan, even if he became the Demon King, he tried to make amends with all his victims. Besides, he can smell their worry. Muzan tries to force him there, but Tanjiro chooses a human life over immortality. When Muzan mentions the dead and how his survival makes him selfish, Tanjiro cries. This seems to pull at something in him. Tanjiro stops, but the hands of those same victims and swordsmen help push him up. Wisteria fills his nose, and Nezuko reaches for him and drags him upward, with Muzan knowing there won't be another chance after this. When Inosuke, Zenitsu, and Giyu grab hold, it's over for Muzan. In reality, he wakes up surrounded by everyone, and finally, with his normal eyes, the first thing he asks about is how Nezuko is. Everyone is beyond relieved to hear his usual self back. Kanao smiles at him fondly, and even Yushido can't help but become emotional. The endless fear gone, but at the cost of so much. 3 months later, and everyone has healed pretty well, with Tanjiro having his lost body parts back, but not able to use them. Nezuko's doing the best of all of them, and she didn't become a demon because she still had the antidote in her system. A flashback shows us Yushido sharing a genuine moment with Tanjiro, and then insulting him as usual when he leaves with Chachamaru. Still, Tanjiro tells him to stay alive for Tamiyo's sake. There's a final meeting at the Ubuyashiki estate, disbanding the organization. They bow, but the two make Kiriya cry by saying how well he did. With Tanjiro still recovering, Tengen visits, and so do the Rengoku family, and the swordsmiths, and the Kakushi. It's actually a lot. Inosuke goes off to steal food and shares a moment with Aoi there. Later, Tanjiro has a talk with Kanao near a significant tree. She now has the snake since Obanai and Mitsuri aren't around to take care of it. Sanemi makes peace with Nezuko, with her reminding him of Genya's personality. The siblings then reconnect with Giyu and Orokodaki. Later, the group visits the graves of all the lost people. Finally, back home, Saburo, who lived near them, is so happy to see them still alive and well. After that, they eat together and live at peace in their family home at last. The final chapter features a time skip, and it's basically an Easter egg hunt of who is where in the present day. We start with Tanjiro and Kanao's descendant waking up from school and meeting Zenitsu and Nezuko's descendants on the way, with the one who looks like Zenitsu emotional over tales from the past. The Nezuko look-alike thinks it's not true and is also super tough with him. He believes in reincarnation, which is meant as foreshadowing for the things to come. The first cameo is Tengen's descendant, Tenma, a famous gymnast who beat up some reporters. Next is Inosuke and Aoi's descendant, Aoba, who discovered the blue spider lily, the flower that Muzan searched for his entire life. Some twin babies, the reincarnation of Muchiro and Yuchiro, pass by them in a stroller. There's also the older girls from another school, Shinobu and Kane's reincarnations. Toko and Kanata then flirt a bit, but before that, he was standing next to two boys, the descendants of Kanamori and Kotetsu. There's a daycare worker giant who you can all guess is Guillaume's reincarnation, but are some of the kids possibly the orphans that he cared for. Then, Yoshiteru suggests they go to a meal place where they can give huge portions. Yeah, it's Obanai and Mitsuri, haven't gotten together like they wanted to. Tanjiro's lookalike, Sumihiko, wakes up late and has to parkour to school to get there faster. We could see that his side kept the impressive athletic abilities from before, but he's more of a troublemaker, passing by two grandpas, Jigoro and Urokodaki's reincarnations. I say that because they both seem to never be married or have kids. Meanwhile, on their TV set, the oldest living person is from the Ubuyashiki family, meaning they broke the curse of the men dying before 25 years old. This might actually be Kirya, since they didn't say how old he is. It would be funny if he actually survived this long. We don't see Hagane Zuka, but his descendant owns an equipment shop. Sumihiko then passes three girls, descendants of Nao, Kiyo, and Sumi. And the police who try to stop him for jumping over their car are Genya and Sanemi. One reincarnated and the other a descendant. Or maybe both are descendants. Who can say? After Sumihiko crosses paths with the reincarnation of Sabito and Makomo, as well as Gyu's descendant, they're all collecting fox keychains, reminding us of Urokodaki's masks. Back to Yoshiteru, he interrupts Takuchi and Goto's descendants looking at an image of a beautiful woman. It was painted by Yushido, who kept his promise to stay alive. Back to Sumihiko, he bumps into Rengoku's reincarnation, or descendant considering the brother was alive and they all look the same. They're being chased by the Shinazugawa brothers, and completely unbothered. Murata's descendant is at the gate trying to keep them out, so they arrive late. And poor Aoba's worried about losing his job and eating alone. He wishes he could live in the mountains instead. Too bad he isn't the same age as his pal's descendants. Finally, the Kamado residence gets called about Sumihiko, and there's a framed picture of the Hanafuda earrings on the wall, along with Yoriichi's sword, and a group photo from when they defeated Muzan. And that is the end of Demon Slayer. If you liked the video, guys, please give it a like. And if you want to see more Demon Slayer content like this, please subscribe as well. Have a great day, and I'll see you in the next one.